Ethan Calloway knelt in the dirt and held a tin cup of water to a stranger's cracked lips, and the whole town went silent. Not because it was kind, because it was dangerous. She was the widow nobody was supposed to help. He was the rancher nobody thought would be foolish enough to try. By Sunday, they tried to destroy him for it. This is the story of what one act of mercy cost a man, and what it built from the ashes. If this story moves you, subscribe to our channel and stay until the very end. Drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories travel. The flour was the only reason Ethan Calloway rode into town that morning. 3 pounds of flour. Maybe salt if Bellamy's prices hadn't jumped again. That was the list. That was all he needed. He'd promised Noah he'd be back before the afternoon heat made the horses mean, and he intended to keep that promise. He didn't intend to kneel in the dirt in front of Bellamy's general store. He didn't intend to start a war. But his daughter opened her mouth, and everything changed. "Papa." May's voice was small. She sat in front of him on the saddle, her little fingers gripping the horn, her body rigid in a way no 6-year-old should ever be. "Papa, why is that lady on the ground?" Ethan's jaw tightened. He'd already seen her. A young woman, couldn't be more than 22 or 23, kneeling in the hard-packed dust beside the store's front step. Not collapsed, not dramatic about it, just kneeling, like she'd run out of places to stand. Her dress was sun-bleached cotton, patched at both elbows. A wedding band still circled her finger, though the skin beneath it was raw and red, like she'd been twisting it for months. Her lips were cracked white from dehydration. She wasn't begging. That was what hit him first. She wasn't asking anyone for anything. She was just there, existing in a place where nobody wanted her to exist. "Papa?" May pulled at his shirt. Ethan dismounted, slow, set May down on the boardwalk, looked around. 6 people on the street. 2 women near the milliner's. A ranch hand loading feed. Old Tom Drucker smoking his pipe. The barber sweeping his step. Every single one of them had their eyes pointed somewhere else. Not because they hadn't seen her, because they had. Horace Bellamy stood in his doorway with his arms crossed, thick as fence posts, his apron stretched over his gut. He didn't look angry. He looked satisfied, like this was a lesson he'd arranged. "Told you yesterday, Mrs. Whitfield," Bellamy said, loud enough for the street to hear. "No credit, no charity. You want to eat? You find someone fool enough to vouch for you." The woman, Clara Whitfield, Ethan would learn later, didn't look up. "I offered to work," she said. Her voice was steady, which surprised him. Dry as dust, barely louder than the wind, but steady. "I offered to sweep your floors, stock your shelves. I don't want charity, Mr. Bellamy. And I told you, I don't need your kind of help. My kind. Widow kind. The kind that brings talk." Clara's hands tightened on her skirt. Her knuckles went white. May tugged Ethan's sleeve again. "Papa, she's thirsty." That was it. That was the whole decision. Not some grand moral calculation. Not righteous anger. Not even pity. A child saw a thirsty woman and said so. Ethan reached for his canteen, walked 4 steps, crouched down until he was level with her. "Ma'am?" Clara's eyes lifted. Green, sharp, wary as a cornered animal. "I don't take pity," she said. "Good," Ethan said. "I don't offer it." He held out the canteen. She stared at it like it might bite her. "It's water," he said. "Just water. I know what it is." "Then drink it." A beat. 2. The heat pressed down on both of them like a hand. She took it. She drank slow, controlled, not desperate, even though she clearly was. She took 3 swallows and handed it back. "Thank you," Ethan nodded, stood up, and Bellamy's voice cut across the space like a blade. "Calloway, you sure you want to do that where people can see?" Ethan turned, slow. The kind of slow that told a man he'd been heard clearly and measured carefully. "Do what?" Ethan said. "Give water to a thirsty woman? Get yourself tangled up in something ain't your concern. A person dying of thirst on your doorstep ain't my concern? She ain't dying. She's making a show." Clara flinched. Barely, but Ethan caught it. "Looked to me like she was kneeling in your dirt because you won't let her work for bread," Ethan said. "That ain't a show. That's a disgrace. And it ain't hers." The street went dead quiet. Old Tom Drucker stopped mid-puff. The two women at the milliner's pulled back behind the door. The ranch hand suddenly found something very interesting inside his feed sack. Bellamy's face darkened. Not rage, something colder. Calculation. "You've got credit here too, Calloway," Bellamy said softly. "Don't forget that." Ethan heard the threat clearly. Every rancher within 40 miles owed Bellamy something. Feed, seed, tools, medicine. He ran the only general store between here and Rollins, and he used that position like a weapon. Ethan looked at May. His daughter's hand was gripping his trouser leg. Her eyes were wide and locked on Clara. He looked at Clara. She'd gone rigid, waiting for him to back down, expecting it, like every other person on that street had backed down before him. "Ma'am," Ethan said, "can you ride?" Clara blinked. "What?" "Ride. A horse. Can you ride one?" Yes." "Can you mend fence?" "I can learn." "Can you cook?" A pause. Something flickered across her face. Not hope exactly. Something more cautious than hope. Something that had been burned before. "I can cook," she said quietly. "Then I've got work," Ethan said. "Fair wages, roof, meals. If you want it." The silence on the street was absolute. Bellamy laughed. Not a real laugh. The kind men use when they want everyone watching to understand how foolish something is. "You're going to take a strange widow home," Bellamy said, "with your children in the house." "I'm going to offer a woman honest work," Ethan said. "Something you could have done yesterday. Don't come crying to me when—" "I won't." Ethan turned his back on Bellamy. "That was deliberate. You didn't turn your back on a man like Horace Bellamy in this town unless you meant it." He meant it. "Ma'am, my wagon's down the street. We can stop at the well first." Clara stood. It took her a moment. Her legs were unsteady, but she locked her knees and lifted her chin and stood like it cost her something she was willing to pay. "I don't even know your name," she said. "Calloway. Ethan Calloway. This is May." May waved. Something cracked in Clara's expression. Just for a second. Like a wall developing its first fissure. "Clara Whitfield," she said. "Mrs. Whitfield." "Just Clara. My husband's dead. His name doesn't protect me anymore." That sentence landed like a stone in still water. Ethan filed it away. He'd learn what it meant later. They walked to the wagon. The town watched, every eye, every window. And Ethan felt the weight of all of them pressing between his shoulder blades like a rifle sight. The ride back was quiet for the first mile. May sat between them, humming something tuneless, her feet swinging off the bench. Clara sat on the far edge of the seat, gripping the rail like she expected to be thrown off at any moment. "How old is she?" Clara asked finally. 6 in April. "She's brave." Ethan glanced over. "She's the one who saw you." Clara's throat moved. "Most people did. They just decided not to." I know. Then why did you? Ethan didn't answer right away. He let the horses find their rhythm, let the questions sit in the heat. Because she asked me why nobody was helping, he said, and I didn't have an answer I could live with. Clara looked away, fast, like she didn't want him to see whatever was happening on her face. They didn't speak again until the ranch. Noah was waiting on the porch, 9 years old, arms crossed, his father's build already showing in his shoulders. He had a stick in one hand, not playing with it, holding it, like a sentry. The boy watched the wagon approach with the same expression Ethan had seen on range dogs when a stranger came too close to the herd. "Who's that?" Noah said before the wagon even stopped. "This is Mrs. Whitfield," Ethan said, climbing down. "She's going to help out around the place for a while." "We don't need help." "Yeah, we do." "No, we don't." Ethan set a hand on Noah's shoulder, firm, not hard. "Son, we've been eating burnt beans and raw biscuits for 4 months. The fence line's got 6 breaks I can't get to because I'm too busy keeping the stock watered. And your sister's wearing a dress she outgrew last winter. We need help." Noah's jaw worked. His eyes cut to Clara, then back to his father. "Mama wouldn't want a stranger in her kitchen." The words hit Ethan like a fist. He crouched down, eye level. "Your mama would want you fed," he said quietly. "She'd want the fences mended, and your sister in a dress that fits. And she'd want me to stop being too stubborn to admit when I'm drowning." Noah's lip trembled, just once. Then he locked it down with a control no 9-year-old should have. "She can't have Mama's room," he said. "She won't. There's the storage room off the kitchen. We'll clear it out." Noah looked at Clara one more time, measured her the way his father had measured Bellamy. Then he turned and walked into the house without another word. Clara stood by the wagon, still as stone. "He lost his mother?" she asked. 18 months ago. Fever took her during spring thaw. "I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry to me. Be patient with him. He's protecting the only thing he's got left." Clara nodded slow. "I understand that better than you think." She started that same afternoon. Ethan showed her the storage room, small, windowless, hot as an oven in the summer air. A cot, a nail on the wall for hanging clothes, a basin. "It's not much," he said. "It's a room with a door that locks," Clara said. "It's more than I've had in 3 months." That sentence sat in Ethan's chest like an ember. He showed her the kitchen. She opened every cabinet, every tin, every jar. Counted everything. Memorized it. Her hands moved with a precision that told him she'd spent a long time managing scarcity. By evening, she'd made biscuits. Real biscuits. Tall and golden and flaky. May ate 3. Noah ate 2 in his room, refusing to come to the table. Ethan set 4 plates anyway. Clara noticed. She stared at that 4th plate, the empty one across from her, and something in her expression shifted. Not softened, shifted, like she was recalculating something she'd assumed about this man. "He'll come around," Ethan said. "And if he doesn't? Then he eats good biscuits in his room, but the plate stays." The next morning came hard and early. Clara was already up when Ethan walked into the kitchen at dawn. Coffee made, biscuits reheated. She'd found the bacon he'd been saving and fried it thin and crisp. "You didn't have to do all this," he said. "You're paying me to work," she said. "This is work." "I haven't actually discussed wages yet." "No, you haven't." He sat down, poured coffee, studied her across the table. "What happened in town?" he asked. "The real story, not what Bellamy tells." Clara's hand tightened around her mug. My husband was Daniel Whitfield. He had 80 acres north of Copper Ridge. When he died, his family, his brother and father, came and took the land. Said a woman couldn't hold title. Said it wasn't proper. Was it legal? No. Daniel's will named me. But they filed a counterclaim. Said I influenced him. Said the marriage was... She stopped. Swallowed. They said things that weren't true. And Bellamy? Mr. Bellamy holds paper on half the ranches in the territory. Daniel's family trades with him. I don't. He picked his side. And the preacher? Clara's mouth thinned. Reverend Crow told the congregation that a woman alone is a woman unprotected by God's design. That my widowhood was a sign I should return to my family back east. You got family back east? No. He knows that? He knows that. Ethan set his mug down. So they're squeezing you out. All of them. They want the land, Mr. Calloway. Daniel found mineral signs on the North 40 before he died. He told me, not his family. If I leave, or if I remarry without legal claim secured, those rights transfer. To who? To whoever holds the land deed, which, right now, is contested. Ethan leaned back, looked at her with different eyes. This wasn't just a hungry widow. This was a woman standing between powerful men and something they wanted. Why didn't you go to the law? With what money? The county seat is 30 miles. Filing costs $10. I've got 40 cents. And nobody in town would lend you a horse. Nobody in town would look at me. The coffee went cold between them. May wandered in, rubbing her eyes. She climbed onto the bench beside Clara without hesitation, leaned against her arm, and yawned. Clara froze. She looked at the child pressed against her like it was the most frightening thing that had happened to her in months. She does that, Ethan said quietly. She decides fast. She shouldn't decide about me. She already did, back in that street. Clara's hand rose, slow, uncertain. She rested it on May's hair, light, barely touching, like she was afraid the girl might shatter, or like she might. By the third day, Ethan noticed things. Clara didn't just work, she engineered. She found the feed waste, grain spilling from a cracked bin he'd been meaning to fix for 6 months. She patched it with tar paper and scrap wood in an hour. She recalculated the water rotation for the stock tanks, figured out he was losing 2 hours a day running cattle to the far creek when he could trench a shallow channel from the spring. Who taught you to figure like that? Ethan asked, watching her sketch irrigation lines in the dirt with a stick. Daniel. He was an engineer before he was a rancher. Said every problem was just math nobody had bothered to do. Smart man. He was, until the fever took him and nobody wanted to remember he'd been smart at all. The bitterness in her voice was controlled, precise, the kind that had been refined by repetition. Ethan recognized it because he carried the same kind. His wife, Sarah, had died in his arms on a Tuesday morning while the children slept in the next room. He'd washed her face, changed her dress, and laid her out on the kitchen table before Noah woke up. Then he'd made breakfast, because the living still needed to eat. He'd never told anyone that. Not the neighbors who brought casseroles he couldn't taste. Not the preacher who'd said Sarah was in God's hands now, like that was supposed to make the bed less empty. He'd carried it alone, because that's what men did. But watching Clara sketch water lines in the dirt, her jaw set, her grief packed down into usefulness, he recognized a fellow survivor. Clara, she looked up. The wages, room and board plus $2 a week. Fair? More than fair. And if I ride to the county seat for the filing? Her stick stopped moving. That's not your fight, Mr. Calloway. Ethan. That's not your fight, Ethan. You're working my land, feeding my children, and fixing problems I was too blind to see. If somebody's trying to steal your claim, that's close enough to my fight. Clara's eyes searched his face, looking for the trap, the angle, the hidden cost. She'd been trained, by experience, by cruelty, by 6 months of closed doors, to look for the price behind every kindness. She didn't find one, and that scared her more than anything. "Don't make promises you can't keep," she said softly. "I don't." She went back to her sketch, but her hand was shaking. That evening, Noah came to the table. He didn't announce it, didn't explain it, just pulled out his chair and sat down like he'd been doing it every night. Clara set his plate without comment. Biscuits, bacon, beans, a glass of cool water from the spring. Noah looked at the food, looked at her. "These biscuits are better than Mama's," he said. Then his eyes went wide, horrified, like he'd betrayed something sacred. "Hey," Clara said gently, "that's just flour and butter talking. Your Mama's biscuits had love in them. Mine just have practice." Noah stared at her. Then he picked up his fork and ate. Ethan watched from his chair, his own fork frozen halfway to his mouth, and felt something crack open inside his chest that he'd nailed shut 18 months ago. 4 plates, 4 people. The table was full again. And out there, in the town they'd ride back into eventually, Horace Bellamy was calculating what this cost him. Silas Crow was writing his Sunday sermon, and the summer heat pressed down on everything, like a promise that the worst was still coming. But tonight, in this kitchen, a boy ate biscuits he shouldn't have liked, made by a woman he shouldn't have trusted. At a table his father had refused to shrink. And that was enough. For now, that was enough. The 4th morning, Clara found the feed ledger. Ethan kept it in a drawer beneath the kitchen counter, shoved behind a rusted tin of nails and a Bible with a cracked spine. She wasn't snooping. She was looking for twine to tie a broken cupboard hinge, and the ledger fell open on the floor. She picked it up, read 3 pages, then sat down at the table and didn't move for 20 minutes. When Ethan came in from the stock tanks, she had the ledger open between them. "You're 3 months behind on feed payments," she said. Ethan poured coffee. "I know. Bellamy's charging you 12% over fair price on grain." "I know that too. And your cattle count is down by 9 heads since spring, but you haven't adjusted your feed order. You're buying grain for animals you don't have." Ethan set the coffee pot down, looked at her. "Daniel's math?" he asked. "Common sense. You're bleeding money, Ethan. Bellamy's got you on a leash, and you're paying him for the privilege." "What do you want me to do? He's the only supplier between here and Rollins." "He's the only supplier because nobody's challenged it. There's a merchant cooperative in Casper. They freight to ranch gates for a flat rate. I read about it in a circular Daniel brought home last year." "Casper's 60 miles. The freight cost is still less than what Bellamy's skimming off you monthly." Ethan stared at her. Not angry, something else. The look of a man who'd been carrying a weight so long he'd forgotten it wasn't part of his body. "How long have you been awake?" he asked. "Since 4. "Did you sleep at all?" "I slept enough." She hadn't. He could see it in the bruises beneath her eyes, the way her hands gripped the mug like it was the only warm thing left in the world. But he didn't press it. "Show me the numbers," he said. She showed him, line by line. And by the time Noah wandered in for breakfast, Ethan had a list of every dollar Bellamy had overcharged him in the past year. It came to $47. "That's a horse," Ethan said quietly. That's your freedom, Clara said. If you stop buying from him. Noah stood in the doorway, listening. He didn't say anything, but his eyes moved between his father and Clara with something that wasn't resentment anymore. It was attention. That afternoon, Ethan rode into town alone. He walked into Bellamy's store, set down his account book, and told Horace he'd be settling his balance in full by month's end and closing the credit line. Bellamy didn't blink. That's your choice, Calloway, he said. But once you close that line, it don't reopen. I understand. Do you? Because winter's coming, and when it does, and your stock needs grain, and your children need medicine, you'll be back in here asking me to extend what I'm offering you right now for free. It's not free, Horace. It never was. Bellamy leaned forward. His voice dropped to the register men use when they want to remind you they own something you need. This about that widow? This is about $47 you overcharged me in 12 months. I run a business. You run a trap, and I just walked out of it. Ethan turned for the door. Calloway, he stopped. You're making enemies you can't afford, Bellamy said. I'm trying to be neighborly about it. Neighborly would have been giving that woman a loaf of bread when she asked for work. You chose different. So did I. He walked out. He could feel Bellamy's eyes on his back all the way to the wagon. And he knew, the way you know a storm's coming by the way animals behave, that something had just shifted. Something that couldn't be undone. When he got home, Clara was on the roof. What in God's name are you doing up there? Ethan shouted. Your shingles are loose on the south side. Another week and you'll have leaks when the rain comes. Get down. I'm almost done. Clara, get down from my roof. She peered over the edge, hair tied back, sleeves rolled, a hammer in her hand that she held like she'd been born with it. You gonna fix them yourself? She asked. He stopped. She had him, and they both knew it. At least tie yourself off. With what? You don't own a rope longer than 6 feet. I'll buy one. From who? You just closed your credit line. He stared up at her. She stared down at him. May sat on the porch step, watching them both with the delighted expression of a child witnessing adults be ridiculous. She got you, Papa, May said. Ethan rubbed his face. Yeah, she did. Clara finished the shingles before sundown. Ethan said nothing more about it, but he moved the tall ladder to the barn where she couldn't reach it without asking. She found it within the hour. He moved it again. She found it again. By the third time, Noah was helping her carry it. That was the first time Ethan Calloway realized he was outnumbered in his own house. And the first time in 18 months that thought made him want to laugh instead of grieve. A week passed, then 2. Clara restructured the pantry, reduced waste by 1/3, extended the flour supply by mixing in cornmeal she ground herself from dried stock. She mended every piece of clothing in the house, including a shirt of Ethan's that had a torn collar he'd been folding under for months. She didn't ask permission for any of it. Ethan noticed that about her. She didn't wait to be told what needed doing. She saw it, calculated it, and did it. Not to impress, not to earn her place, because she couldn't physically tolerate inefficiency. Your wife was like this, wasn't she? Clara said one evening, not a question. They were on the porch, children in bed, heat still pressing down even though the sun had gone. Like what? Couldn't sit still. Saw every broken thing as a personal insult. Ethan's chest tightened. Sarah could sit still. She just chose not to. Daniel was the same. He'd walk into a room and his eyes would go straight to whatever was crooked. Drove me crazy. I'd say, "Daniel, we're at church. Stop staring at the uneven pew." He'd say, "I can't help it, Clara. It's offensive to God and geometry." She smiled. Small, private. The first real smile Ethan had seen from her. "He sounds like a good man," Ethan said. He was the best man. And they threw dirt on his grave and stole everything he built before the flowers died. The smile was gone, replaced by something harder, something with teeth. "We'll get it back," Ethan said. "You keep saying that. Because I mean it." Meaning something and doing something are different animals, Ethan. "I know. I'm working on the doing part." She looked at him sidelong. "You always this stubborn?" "Sarah said it was my worst quality." Sarah was right. They sat in silence after that. Not uncomfortable silence, the kind that happens when two people stop performing and just exist in the same space. Ethan hadn't felt that in 18 months. It scared him half to death. The first blow landed on a Tuesday. Ethan rode to Henderson's ranch to arrange a hay trade. Same arrangement they'd had for 3 years. Henderson came out on this porch, looked past Ethan's shoulder like someone might be watching, and said, "Can't do it this year, Calloway. Got my own needs." "Jim, you've got 40 acres of hay you can't use. You traded me surplus last July." "Things change." "What things?" Henderson wouldn't meet his eye. "Just things. Nothing personal." "Jim?" "Bellamy called in my note. Said if I trade with you, he'll move up my payment schedule. I can't afford that, Ethan. I got 4 kids." Ethan felt it hit. Not anger, something colder. The understanding of how power actually worked in a small town. Not through violence, through paper, through debt, through the quiet threat of a man who held your livelihood in a ledger. "He's doing this because of Clara," Ethan said. "He's doing this because you embarrassed him. And Horace Bellamy don't forgive being embarrassed." Ethan rode home with no hay and a knot in his gut that wouldn't loosen. The next day, Miller's ranch refused to lend a breeding bull. Said the animal was sick. Ethan had seen the bull that morning, healthy as a horse. The day after that, the blacksmith turned down a repair on Ethan's plow blade. Said he was backed up. His forge was cold. The squeeze was on. Clara saw it in his face when he came home empty-handed the 3rd day running. "They're cutting you off," she said. "Yep." "All of them?" "Everyone who owes Bellamy, which is everyone." Clara set down the shirt she was mending. Her hands went flat on the table. "Then I should go." Ethan's head came up. "What?" "If I leave, he stops. You get your trade back. Your children get fed. This ends." "And you go where?" "That's not your problem." "The hell it isn't." "Ethan, you leave and Bellamy wins. He learns that all he has to do is squeeze hard enough and people fold. You think it stops with you? Next, it's anyone who disagrees with him. Anyone who prices their own dignity above his approval. That's a principle. Principles don't feed children. My children are fine. For now. What about October? What about January?" Ethan stood up. His chair scraped against the floor. He paced 3 steps, stopped, turned. "My father told me something when I was 14, he said. He said, 'Ethan, the world is full of men who'll tell you what's practical. Most of them are cowards explaining why they quit. I'm not quitting.'" "Your father wasn't watching his neighbors starve him out." "Actually, he was. He ran a station on the Underground Railroad in Missouri. Lost everything. Friends, business, nearly his life. And he never once apologized for doing what was right." Clara stared at him. "You're comparing me to escaped slaves?" "I'm comparing cowardice to cowardice. The specifics change. The math doesn't." The room was hot and tight. Clara's eyes were bright. Not tears. Fury. The kind of fury that comes when someone refuses to let you sacrifice yourself, and you don't know whether to thank them or hit them. "You're a fool, Ethan Calloway." "Probably." "You're going to lose this ranch." "Maybe." "And you're just going to stand there?" "I'm going to sit, actually, and eat whatever you're making for supper. And tomorrow I'm going to figure out how to get hay without Jim Henderson's help." He sat down, pulled his chair back to the table. Clara didn't move for a long time. Then she picked up the shirt and went back to mending it. Her stitches were angry, small and tight and furious. Neither of them mentioned her leaving again. The following Sunday, Reverend Silas Crow held a special sermon. Ethan heard about it from Mrs. Abigail Turner, who rode out to his ranch on a mule that looked older than the territory itself. She was 71 years old, sharp as a tack, and afraid of absolutely nothing that walked on two legs. "He's going to preach about you," she said, accepting a cup of water on the porch. "About me specifically?" "Not by name, but everyone'll know. He's calling it the danger of misplaced compassion. Real subtle, that man." "What's his angle?" Abigail took a long drink. "Same as Bellamy's. They want the woman gone. But Crow's smarter about it. He'll frame it as moral concern. Say a widower and a young widow under the same roof invites sin. Say the children are being exposed to impropriety." "That's a lie." "Of course it's a lie. But lies preached from a pulpit sound like God's own truth to people who don't think too hard." Clara appeared in the doorway. She'd been listening. "Mrs. Turner," she said. Abigail looked her over, head to toe. The kind of assessment only old women can get away with. "You're thinner than I expected," Abigail said. "Eat more of those biscuits." "You know about the biscuits?" "Honey, I know about everything. That's the privilege of being old and owning my own land outright." She turned to Ethan. "You need to be in that church on Sunday." "I wasn't planning on it." "Plan on it. If you're not there, Crow controls the story. He tells them what to think, and nobody pushes back. You show up. You make them look you in the eye while they judge you. And that helps how?" Abigail smiled. It was the kind of smile that had survived wars and winters and the death of 3 husbands. "Because most people are decent, Ethan. Not brave, mind you, but decent. And decency's harder to hold on to when the man you're wronging is sitting right in front of you." She finished her water, patted May on the head, told Noah his boots were untied when they weren't, just to see him look, and rode her ancient mule back down the road. Clara sat down in the chair Abigail had vacated. "She's something," Clara said. "She's the only person in that town who isn't afraid of Bellamy." "Because she doesn't owe him anything." "Because she'd rather starve than bow." Clara was quiet for a moment. "I like her." "Everyone does. They just can't afford to show it." That night, the brush fire started. Ethan smelled it before he saw it. The sharp, bitter tang of sage burning, carried on a wind that had no business blowing that direction in July. He was on the porch, unable to sleep, when the orange glow appeared on the ridge east of the ranch. He was saddled and riding before Clara made it outside. "Stay with the children," he shouted. "The cattle," she shouted back. "Your east pasture." "I know." "If the wind shifts south, you've got maybe an hour before it hits the fence line. Drive them west toward the creek bed. The rocks will break the fire's path." He reined his horse, stared at her. "How do you know my east pasture?" "I walked your fence line 3 days ago. I know every break, every gate, every grade on this property. Go." He went. The fire took 6 hours to fight. Ethan drove cattle through darkness and smoke with a wet bandana over his face and a fear in his chest that had nothing to do with flames. Henderson's boy showed up with a shovel. 2 ranch hands from the Dalton spread rode in without being asked. Men who'd been told not to trade with him still came running when fire threatened, because fire didn't care about credit lines or politics. When Ethan rode back at dawn, smoke-blackened and half-deaf from the roar, Clara had water boiling, rags torn for bandaging, and every animal on the property accounted for. "You moved the chickens," he said, dismounting on legs that barely held him. "Wind shifted at 3. I put them in the root cellar." "The root cellar doesn't have ventilation." "It does now. I knocked a hole in the east wall with your hand axe." "You knocked a hole in my root cellar." "Would you prefer live chickens or an intact wall?" He sat down on the porch step. His hands were shaking. Adrenaline, exhaustion, something else. "Clara." "What?" "Thank you." She handed him water. "Drink." "I said, I heard you. Drink." He drank. She sat beside him, not close, not far, just beside him. May appeared in the doorway in her nightgown, clutching a cloth doll. "Is the fire gone, Papa?" "It's gone, sweetheart." "Clara said the chickens were having a sleepover in the cellar." "Did she?" "She said they were scared of the fire, so they needed a safe place. Like when I'm scared and I come to your bed." Ethan looked at Clara. She was looking at her hands. A blush crawled up her neck, visible even in the dim light. "Go back to bed, baby," Ethan said to May. "I'll come tuck you in." May went, but she stopped at the door and looked back. "Clara, are you scared?" Clara's voice was steady. "Not anymore, sweetheart." "Good. Papa's here. He makes the scared go away." The door closed. Ethan and Clara sat in the smoky dawn light, not looking at each other, both feeling the weight of what a 6-year-old had just said with more clarity than either of them could manage. "She's going to break my heart," Clara whispered. "She does that." "Ethan, if something happens and I have to go, she'll be hurt." "Then don't go." The simplicity of it hung between them. 3 words. No argument attached, no conditions. Clara pressed her palms against her knees and breathed once, slow and measured. "You make it sound easy." It's not. Not a single part of it is easy. But the right things never are. Noah appeared at the window. He'd been watching, listening. His face was unreadable. But when Ethan came inside to tuck May in, he found Noah had pulled a blanket from the chest and laid it on the porch rail. For Clara, without being asked. Small acts, quiet shifts, the kind of change that doesn't announce itself, but rearranges everything underneath. Monday morning, Ethan found the fence cut. Not broken by weather or stock. Cut. Clean, deliberate slices in 3 sections of wire along his western boundary. The kind of damage that takes a man with pliers and bad intentions. He stood there, holding the severed wire in his hands, and felt something cold settle in his gut. This wasn't just social pressure anymore. This was sabotage. And on Sunday, I'm going to sit in Silas Crow's church and look him in the eye. Clara's jaw tightened. "They'll come after you harder." "They already are." "Ethan, this is my fight." It was. Now it's ours. The word landed between them like a third presence at the table. Ours. Not his, not hers. A word that carried weight neither of them had agreed to, but both of them felt. Clara's hands went still on the trousers. "I haven't had an ours since Daniel died," she said quietly. Neither have I. They looked at each other across the table. Not romantic. Not yet. Something deeper and more frightening than romance. The recognition that two broken lives had begun, without permission, to lean against each other. Noah walked in, saw their faces, and stopped. "What happened?" he said. "Someone cut our fence," Ethan said. He used the word deliberately. Our. Noah's expression hardened. 9 years old and already wearing his father's iron. "Who?" Noah said. "Doesn't matter who. What matters is we fix it. I can help. I know you can. I'll get the pliers." He was out the door before Ethan could respond. Clara watched him go. "He said our fence," she said. "He heard me say it first. He didn't have to repeat it." Ethan picked up his hat. No, he didn't. He walked out after his son, and Clara sat alone in the kitchen, her hands on a pair of trousers that belonged to a boy who was starting to trust her, in a house that was starting to feel like something she'd lost the right to name. She pressed her palms flat on the table. She didn't cry. She hadn't cried since the day they took her land. But she closed her eyes, and her lips moved, and if anyone had been close enough, they'd have heard her whisper, "Please, let this one be real." Sunday came like a reckoning. Ethan put on a clean shirt, the only white one he owned. Sarah had ironed it the week before she died, and he'd kept it folded in the cedar chest like a relic. He buttoned it slow, feeling the weight of what he was about to walk into. Clara stood in the kitchen doorway watching him. "You don't have to do this," she said. "Yeah, I do. He'll come at you in front of everyone." "That's the idea." "Ethan, this isn't just about me anymore. If Crow turns that congregation against you, really turns them, Noah and May pay the price." Ethan picked up his hat, turned it in his hands. "My children are watching me, Clara. Every single day, they're watching. And one day they're going to be standing where I'm standing, and they're going to have to decide whether the easy road or the right road is the one they take. What I do today teaches them which one to choose." Clara's hands gripped the doorframe. "And if it goes wrong?" "Then they'll know their father stood up anyway." He put the hat on, walked to the wagon. Noah was already sitting in the back, his hair combed wet, his jaw set in a line that made him look twice his age. May sat beside him in a dress Clara had altered from one of Sarah's old skirts. It was too long and pinned at the shoulders, but May wore it like a queen's robe because Clara had sewn a small blue ribbon at the collar and told her it matched her eyes. Clara didn't get on the wagon. Ethan looked back. "Coming?" "I wasn't invited to this fight." "You're not going as a fighter. You're going as a member of this household, and this household goes to church together." "Ethan, get on the wagon, Clara." She got on the wagon. The ride into town took 40 minutes. Nobody spoke. The heat was already brutal, pressing down on them, turning the air thick. May hummed. Noah cracked his knuckles until Ethan told him to stop. Clara sat straight-backed, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed forward like a woman walking to her own trial. The church was full. Ethan felt it the moment they pulled up. Too many wagons. Too many horses. Word had spread. Crow's special sermon had drawn people from ranches that hadn't attended service in months. They weren't here for God. They were here for the show. Ethan climbed down, helped May, offered his hand to Clara. She looked at it. "Everyone's watching," she said quietly. "I know." She took his hand, stepped down, released it immediately. But the damage was done. Every eye on that churchyard saw Ethan Calloway help Clara Whitfield down from his wagon like she belonged there. Bellamy stood near the church steps, thick arms crossed, talking with 2 other ranchers. He stopped mid-sentence when Ethan walked up. "Calloway," Bellamy said. "Surprised to see you." "Shouldn't be. I've been coming to this church since before you moved here, Horace." "Things change." "Not my faith, just my patience." Ethan walked past him, held the door for Clara and the children, walked in. The pews were packed, faces turned. Whispers rippled through the congregation like wind through dry grass. Ethan walked to the fourth row, his family's row, the one Sarah had sat in every Sunday for 6 years, and sat down. Clara sat beside him, May between them, Noah on the end, closest to the aisle, like a guard. Mrs. Abigail Turner sat 3 rows back. She caught Ethan's eye and gave him a nod so small only he could see it. Silas Crow entered from the vestry. He was a tall man, thin, the kind of thin that made him look like God had stretched him toward heaven and forgotten to fill him in. His hair was silver at the temples, his voice a rich baritone that could make a grocery list sound like scripture. He was, by every measure, an effective preacher. And he was, by every measure, a fraud. Crow took the pulpit, opened his Bible, let the silence build. "Brothers and sisters," he began, "I've been losing sleep." Murmurs. "I've been losing sleep because I love this town. I love every soul in this room. And when I see a soul in danger, when I see a household in spiritual peril, my conscience won't let me rest." His eyes swept the room, landed on Ethan, moved away. Smooth. The book tells us that a man's home is his sanctuary, that within those walls he is entrusted with the moral formation of his children, that the company he keeps reflects the state of his soul. Clara's hands tightened in her lap. "Now, I'm not here to name names," Crow continued, and every head in the room turned toward Ethan's row. "But I am here to ask a question. When a man, a good man, a man we respect, invites temptation into his home, do we have a duty to speak, or do we hide behind politeness and watch him fall?" Ethan felt May press closer to his side. He put his arm around her. "Because the enemy doesn't come as fire and brimstone, friends. He comes as need, as pity, as a pretty face with a sad story. And before you know it, the righteous man is compromised, his children are confused, and the community that should have spoken up is left picking up the pieces." Clara's breathing changed, shallow, controlled. The breathing of someone being publicly humiliated who refuses to let it show. Crow built his sermon for 20 minutes. Never said Ethan's name, never said Clara's. Didn't need to. Every reference landed like a pointed finger. The wayward man, the temptress disguised as a victim, the innocent children caught between. Ethan sat still through all of it, hands on his knees, face neutral, listening. When Crow finally paused for breath, Ethan stood up. The church went dead silent. "Mind if I say something, Reverend?" Ethan's voice was calm, steady, the kind of calm that took everything he had to maintain. Crow's eyes narrowed. He hadn't expected this. A confrontation, maybe, but not in front of the whole congregation. Not this directly. "This is God's house, Mr. Calloway, not a debating hall. Then God won't mind me speaking the truth in it." A ripple through the pews. Abigail Turner shifted forward in her seat. "Reverend Crow has been talking about my household," Ethan said, turning to face the congregation. "So let me tell you about my household. 6 weeks ago, I rode into town for flour. I found a woman kneeling in the dirt outside Bellamy's store, dehydrated, starving. She'd offered to work for bread and been turned away." "This isn't the time," Crow started. "She'd been turned away," Ethan continued, louder, "because her dead husband's family is trying to steal her land, And the men who run this town's commerce and this town's church are helping them do it. Gasps. Real ones, not polite ones. Bellamy, sitting in the back row, uncrossed his arms. "That's slander," Bellamy said. "It's arithmetic, Horace." Ethan reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded paper. "This is a copy of Daniel Whitfield's will, notarized, filed with the territorial court. It names Clara Whitfield as sole heir to 80 acres, including mineral rights on the North 40. Silence. His brother and father filed a counterclaim. That counterclaim was supported by a letter from Reverend Crow. Crow's face drained of color, stating that Clara Whitfield was of unsound moral character and unfit to hold property. A letter written 3 weeks after Daniel's death, before Clara had even finished grieving. Crow gripped the pulpit. That letter was a pastoral assessment. That letter was filed with a land claim, Reverend. Pastoral assessments don't get filed with the county recorder. Legal testimony does. The congregation stirred, heads turning, whispers building. Ethan wasn't finished. Horace Bellamy has been overcharging every rancher in this territory by 10 to 15% on goods. He uses credit lines as leverage to control who trades with who. 2 weeks ago, he told Jim Henderson that if Henderson traded hay with me, he'd call in Henderson's note early. Henderson, sitting 4 rows back, looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him. When that didn't break me, someone cut my fence line. 3 sections, clean cuts, done during the brush fire when no one would notice. More gasps. And here's what ties it together, Ethan said. The mineral rights on Clara's land. The ones Daniel found before he died. Bellamy's been buying land parcels around Copper Ridge for 2 years. Every parcel adjacent to the Whitfield claim. If Clara loses her rights, if she's driven out or forced to remarry without legal standing, those mineral rights transfer to whoever holds the deed. And the man positioning himself to hold that deed is sitting right there. Every eye turned to Bellamy. Horace Bellamy stood up, slowly. His face was the color of old brick. "You're a liar, Calloway." "Am I? Then explain to these folks why you bought the Miller parcel in March, the Dawson Quarter section in May, and the creek lot that borders Clara's North 40 just last month. All 3 surround her claim. All 3 are worthless for ranching, but real valuable if there's mineral underneath." Bellamy's mouth opened, closed. "You don't know what you're talking about," he said. But his voice had lost its authority. It was the voice of a man whose script had been taken away. "And Reverend," Ethan turned back to Crow, "when did Bellamy make his last donation to this church?" Crow said nothing. "Because I checked the church ledger. It's public record. Bellamy's donations tripled in the 3 months after Daniel Whitfield died. Right around the time you wrote that letter." The silence that followed was the loudest sound Ethan had ever heard. Clara sat in the pew with her hands in her lap and her chin up and tears running down her face that she didn't bother to hide. Not because she was broken, because someone had finally said the truth out loud in a room full of people who'd been pretending not to know it. May reached over and took Clara's hand. Noah sat rigid, his eyes locked on his father with an expression that had crossed from admiration into something permanent, something he would carry for the rest of his life. Abigail Turner stood up. "I've sat in this church for 37 years, she said. Her voice carried the way old voices do, thin but absolute. "I sat here when my first husband died, when my second died, when my third died. Not once did anyone question my right to own my land. Not once did anyone write a letter calling me unfit. You know why? Because I didn't have anything they wanted." She looked at Crow. "Shame on you, Silas." She looked at Bellamy. "And shame on you, Horace. Your mother would weep." She sat down. For a moment, Ethan thought it might work. He thought the weight of evidence, The clarity of the accusation, the old woman's moral authority, might tip the room. Then Bellamy spoke. "This is what happens," Bellamy said, adjusting his coat, recalibrating. "When a man lets a manipulative woman into his home. She fills his head with conspiracy, turns him against his neighbors, against his church." He looked around the room, made eye contact with every rancher who owed him money, every family who depended on his store, every person whose livelihood ran through his ledger. "I've served this community for 12 years, built this store from nothing, extended credit when the banks wouldn't, kept families fed through 2 winters. And now, a stranger, a woman nobody here knows, has turned one of our own against us." He pointed at Ethan. "You've been deceived, Calloway, and I feel sorry for you." He walked out, and one by one, families stood and followed him. The Hendersons, the Millers, the Dawsons, the Pratt family, the Coopers. One after another, they filed out of the pews and through the door, most of them unable to meet Ethan's eyes. Half the church emptied. Crow stood at his pulpit, gripping it with both hands, his knuckles white. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The Exodus said everything. Ethan watched them go, every single one. He'd known this might happen. He'd prepared for it. But the reality of watching neighbors he'd known for years choose Bellamy's power over the truth, that hit different than the theory. Clara pulled her hand gently from May's grip and stood. "Ethan, sit down." He realized he was still standing, exposed, the center of a half-empty church, with the remaining congregation staring at him with expressions that ranged from sympathy to fear. He sat. Crow finally spoke. "I think we should close in prayer." "I think you should resign," Abigail said from her pew. Crow's jaw clenched. He closed his Bible, walked out through the vestry door without another word. The remaining congregation sat in stunned silence. Then a voice from the back. Tom Drucker, old Tom, who smoked his pipe and watched everything and said nothing. "I believe him," Tom said. "The Calloway boy. I was there the day she was kneeling. I didn't help. Nobody did. That's on me. But the boy's right. What's happening to that woman ain't Christian." Another voice. Elsa Garrett, a rancher's wife. "Bellamy raised my prices 3 times last year. I thought it was supply costs. Now I'm not so sure." Another. Young James Buell. "He told me he'd foreclose on my father's lien if I sold Calloway hay. My father built that farm from nothing." The voices came slowly, quietly, each one a small act of courage from someone who'd been too afraid to speak alone. Ethan sat and listened, and felt something he hadn't felt since the day Sarah died. He wasn't alone. It wasn't victory. Half the town had walked out behind Bellamy. The power structure was intact. Sunday dinner tables all across the valley would be filled with Bellamy's version of events. By morning, Ethan Calloway would be the fool who listened to a scheming widow. But the people still in this church, 15, maybe 20, they'd heard the truth. And they'd chosen to stay. Clara leaned close to him. Her voice was barely a breath. "You just made the most powerful man in this territory your enemy." He was already my enemy. Now he's everyone's. Half of everyone. That's enough to start. They walked out of the church into blinding heat. May held Clara's hand. Noah walked beside his father. Abigail Turner fell in beside them. "Well," Abigail said, "that was more excitement than I've had since my 3rd wedding." "Mrs. Turner, I appreciate what you said in there." "I said what was true. That's not a favor, Ethan. That's a minimum." She looked at Clara. "You all right, child?" Clara's face was still streaked with tears she hadn't bothered to wipe. I don't know. Good answer. The honest one usually is. Abigail mounted her ancient mule with a grace that defied her years. They'll come at you harder now. Both of you. Bellamy can't let this stand. If people start questioning him, his whole system collapses. I know, Ethan said. So what are you going to do? Ride to the county seat tomorrow. File Clara's claim properly. Put it on record where Bellamy can't touch it. That's 30 miles. I know. In this heat? I know. Abigail looked at him, then at Clara, then back at him. Sarah would be proud of you, she said. She rode away before he could respond. Ethan stood in the churchyard with his family, and that word had shifted now, expanded without anyone voting on it, and watched the dust settle from Abigail's departure. Papa, Noah said. Yeah, son? That was real brave. It didn't feel brave. It felt like jumping off a cliff. Is that different? Ethan looked at his boy, 9 years old, standing straight, eyes clear. No, Ethan said. I guess it isn't. They drove home in silence. Clara didn't speak until they pulled into the ranch. The children went inside. Ethan started unhitching the horses. Ethan? He didn't look up. Yeah. What you did in there. Nobody's ever done anything like that for me. I didn't do it for you. Her breath caught. I did it because it was true. When Daniel was alive, she said, I used to think he was the strongest man I'd ever known. He built a ranch from empty land. He fought his own family for the right to marry me. He worked until his hands bled. She paused. He never stood up in a room full of people and told them they were wrong. Not once. He fought with his hands and his brain. You fought with your voice, in front of God and everybody, with your children watching. She stepped closer. That takes a different kind of strong, Ethan. He looked at her. Really looked. Not past her, not through her, not at the idea of her. At her. This woman who'd knelt in dirt rather than beg, who'd calculated feed ratios and fixed his roof and made his daughter laugh and cracked his son's armor, piece by piece, without ever asking for permission. Clara. What? When I ride to the county seat tomorrow, I'm filing your mineral claim, your property protection. And one more thing. What one more thing? He set the harness down. A notice of intent to marry. Clara stopped breathing. Not for romance, he said quickly. For protection. If you're my wife, Bellamy can't challenge your claim through the Whitfield family. The property transfer's clean. The mineral rights are secured. It's legal armor. Legal armor. Yes. You're proposing a legal strategy. I'm proposing a solution. In a barn. I didn't plan the location. Clara stared at him. He couldn't read her face. Every emotion he'd learned to identify in 6 weeks of living alongside this woman was happening at once and canceling each other out. You don't love me, Ethan. I respect you. I trust you. My children need you. And I'd rather build something real with an honest woman than spend the rest of my life proving to this town that I don't need anyone. That's not love. It's the foundation of it. Everything else, if it comes, comes on its own time. Clara's eyes filled. Not the proud, defiant tears from the church. Something rawer, something she'd buried so deep she'd forgotten it was there. Daniel told me he loved me on our first day, she whispered. Built a life on it. And when he died, the love didn't protect a single thing he'd built. It all fell apart. I'm not offering you words, Clara. I'm offering you a wall. Between you and every man trying to take what's yours. And what do you get? A partner. Someone who sees what I miss, who fights when I can't, who makes my daughter laugh and my son eat at the table. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. This is the worst proposal I've ever heard, she said. Is that a no? It's a, you're going to have to do better than a barn and a legal strategy, Ethan Calloway. He almost smiled. Fair enough. But the filing, she said. Do the filing, protect the claim, and we'll figure out the rest when you come home. When you come home. Not when you get back. Not when you return. When you come home. Ethan picked up the harness. His hands had stopped shaking. I'll leave before dawn, he said. I'll have breakfast ready. She walked toward the house, stopped, turned back. Ethan? Yeah? For the record, if you ever propose to me again, don't lead with mineral rights. She went inside, and Ethan Calloway stood alone in the barn, holding a horse harness covered in smoke and sweat and the residue of the bravest and most terrifying day of his life. And he laughed. Quiet, private, real. The first real laugh in 18 months. Ethan left before the first light touched the sky. Clara had breakfast on the table at 4 in the morning. Coffee, biscuits, bacon. She'd packed a saddlebag with jerky, hardtack, and a canteen she'd filled from the cold spring. He stood at the kitchen door with the bag in his hand, and she stood at the stove with her back to him. And neither of them said anything for a long moment. 30 miles, she said. I've done it before. Not with half the territory wanting you to fail. That part's new. She turned around. Her eyes were red. She hadn't slept. Come back, she said. That's the plan. I mean come back whole. Don't get into a fight on the road. Don't stop at any ranch between here and the county seat. Don't trust anyone who offers you a meal or a bed. Clara, I'm serious. Bellamy knows you're going. He has to know. And if those papers get filed, he loses everything he's been building toward. Men like that don't just let you walk into a courthouse. Ethan set the bag down, stepped closer. I'll be careful. You'll be stupid. You'll be noble and righteous and stupid, because that's who you are. So I'm asking you, for me, be careful instead. He looked at her. In the half-dark kitchen, with a lamp throwing shadows across her face, she looked like someone who'd already lost everything once, and was bracing to lose it again. 2 days, he said. I'll be back in 2 days. Promise me. I promise. She handed him a folded paper. The mineral survey notes. Daniel's handwriting. The original. I've been keeping it sewn into my dress lining since the day they took the land. Ethan unfolded it. Columns of numbers, geological notes. A small hand-drawn map of the North 40, with markings he didn't understand, but a county surveyor would. You've been carrying this the whole time? He said. It's the only proof that can't be forged or disputed. Daniel's hand, Daniel's observations, Daniel's signature. I would have died before I let them take it. He folded it carefully, put it inside his shirt, against his chest. I'll guard it like it's mine. It is yours now. That sentence held more weight than either of them acknowledged. He picked up the saddlebag and walked out. Noah was waiting by the horse, already saddled. The boy had done it himself in the dark. You did this? Ethan said. Check the shoes, too. Left front was loose. I tightened it. Ethan put his hand on Noah's shoulder, squeezed. You're the man of this house until I get back. I know. You watch out for your sister. And for Clara. I know, Papa. And if anyone comes to this ranch that you don't recognize, you bolt the door, and you don't open it. Understand? Noah's face tightened. You think they'd come here? I think we need to be ready for anything. I can shoot. I know you can. But you don't shoot unless there's no other choice. And there's always another choice. Noah swallowed hard. Yes, sir. Ethan mounted, looked down at his son. I'm proud of you, Noah. Your mama would be too. The boy's lip trembled. He bit it still. Ride fast, Papa. Ethan rode. The first 10 miles were empty. Nothing but heat and dust and the sound of hoofbeats. He pushed the horse hard, but not reckless, keeping a steady pace that would eat distance without burning the animal out. At mile 14, he found the road blocked. 3 men on horseback. Not bandits. Worse. Men he recognized. Hank Whitfield, Daniel's brother. A thick-necked man with a face like a clenched fist. Beside him, a ranch hand Ethan didn't know by name, but recognized from Bellamy's store. And a third man, younger, armed. Hank sat his horse in the center of the road. Calloway. Ethan reined up. Hank, heard you were heading to the county seat. News travels fast. Small territory. Where are you going with those papers? That's my business. It's my family's business when you're filing claims on my brother's land. Your brother's widow's land. Daniel left it to Clara. You know that. Hank's jaw worked. Daniel was sick when he wrote that will. Fever-minded. Our father's contesting it. Your father's contesting it because there's mineral value and he wants it. That's not grief, Hank. That's greed. The ranch hand shifted in his saddle. His hand moved toward his belt. I wouldn't, Ethan said, calm as creek water. Whatever Bellamy's paying you, it's not enough for what happens next if you reach for that. The hand stopped. Hank leaned forward. Turn around, Calloway. Go home. Forget the filing. Forget the woman. This doesn't end well for you. It doesn't end well for you either, Hank. But the difference is, I know it, and I'm still here. You're a fool. Everybody keeps telling me that, starting to wear it like a badge. Hank's horse stamped. The younger man's hand twitched again. Think about your children, Calloway. That boy of yours. That little girl. Ethan's blood went cold. Every muscle in his body locked. Did you just threaten my children? I'm saying think about what matters. You listen to me. Ethan's voice dropped to a register that made all 3 horses nervous. If you, or anyone else, so much as looks at my children wrong, I will burn your world to the ground. Not Bellamy's way, with ledgers and crevice lines. My way. And you won't see it coming until it's already done. Silence. Hank held his gaze, looking for the bluff. He didn't find one. Get out of my road, Ethan said. The 3 men sat there. 5 seconds. 10. Hank pulled his horse to the side. Ethan rode through the gap without looking back. His hands were shaking on the reins. Not fear. Rage. The kind of rage a father carries like a loaded weapon. Always holstered. Always ready. He rode the remaining 16 miles without stopping. The county seat was a dusty collection of buildings that called itself a town because it had a courthouse and a saloon. Ethan tied his horse, walked into the recorder's office, and laid out every document on the clerk's desk. Clara's claim, Daniel's survey notes, the original will, and a notice of intent to marry. The clerk was a small man with spectacles and ink-stained fingers. He read through everything twice. This is clean, the clerk said. Will's notarized. Surveys in the deceased's hand. The counterclaim from the Whitfield family has no supporting documentation beyond a character reference from a, he squinted, Reverend Silas Crow? That's right. A pastoral letter isn't legal standing. I'm surprised this counterclaim wasn't dismissed already. It wasn't dismissed because nobody filed on the widow's behalf. She couldn't afford the ride or the fee. The clerk looked up. And you're filing for her? with her authorization, written and witnessed. Ethan laid down Clara's signed authorization, Abigail Turner's witness signature at the bottom. The clerk stamped every document, filed them, recorded the mineral claim, recorded the property protection, and recorded the notice of intent. "This'll take 30 days to become binding," the clerk said. "But once it's filed, any competing claim has to go through territorial court. That's a judge, not a preacher." That's all I needed to hear. Ethan paid the $10 filing fee, money Clara had insisted he take from the savings she'd built by reducing the ranch's waste. Her money, her fight. Filed with his hands. He walked out of the courthouse and stood in the street and breathed. Done. Whatever Bellamy did next, whatever Crow preached, whatever Hank Whitfield threatened, the claim was filed. The law was in motion. And the law, unlike a small-town power structure, didn't care who owned the general store. He started the ride home. At mile 8, the younger man from the road was waiting. Alone this time, standing beside his horse. No weapon visible. Ethan stopped, hand on his belt. "I ain't here to fight," the young man said. He was maybe 20, sunburned, nervous. "My name's Will Dawson. I work for Bellamy." "I know who you work for. Mr. Calloway, Bellamy sent Hank to stop you. But there's something else. Something Hank don't know." Ethan waited. "Bellamy's been diverting water upstream from your ranch. He had 2 men dam the creek at Sawyer's Bend 3 days ago. Your stock tanks are going to run dry by end of week." Ethan felt it like a punch. Water. In a drought summer. Bellamy wasn't just squeezing him economically anymore. He was trying to kill his cattle. "Why are you telling me this?" Ethan asked. "Because my father's the one he sent to build the dam. And my father came home and couldn't sleep. Said he didn't sign up to kill a man's livestock. Said there's a line between business and cruelty. And Bellamy crossed it." "Your father's Dawson? Tom Dawson?" "Yes, sir." "Bellamy bought your father's land." "Bought it cheap, after he called in the note early. My father had no choice." Ethan looked at this boy, saw the shame, the anger, the desperate need to do one right thing in the middle of a wrong he'd been dragged into. "Thank you, Will." "Don't thank me. I'm still scared of him." Being scared and doing right anyway, that's about the best a man can do. Will mounted and rode away fast, like courage had a time limit and his was expiring. Ethan pushed his horse harder. He rode through the night, 30 miles on a tired horse in the dark, guided by stars and fury, and the knowledge that his cattle, his children's inheritance, were dying of thirst, while a rich man sat in his store and waited. He reached the ranch at dawn. Clara was on the porch. She'd been there all night. He knew because the lamp beside her had burned dry. "You're back," she said. Her voice cracked on the second word. "I'm back. It's filed. All of it." She closed her eyes. Her whole body sagged, like a rope that had been holding too much weight, and finally found a post to wrap around. "Clara, there's something else." Her eyes opened. "Bellamy dammed the creek, upstream at Sawyer's Bend. Our water's being cut off." Clara's face went through 3 emotions in 2 seconds. Shock, fear, and then something hard and bright and furious. "When?" "3 days ago. Will Dawson told me. His father built it." "How long until the stock tanks go dry?" "Days. Maybe less in this heat." Clara stood up. Her exhaustion fell away like a shed skin. "We can't move the cattle to the creek if the creek's dry." "But there's the spring, the one I've been using for the house water. It feeds from underground. Bellamy can't dam groundwater." "It's not enough for the whole herd." No, but it's enough if we reduce the herd. Reduce how? Sell. Now. Before the cattle start showing thirst. Drive 20 head to the railhead at Medicine Bow. Sell at market price while they're still healthy. Use the money to buy water rights from someone upstream of Bellamy's dam. That's 2 days' drive to Medicine Bow. Then we leave today. We? You can't drive 20 head alone, Ethan. Not in this heat. Not on no sleep. And who watches the children? Mrs. Turner. I'll ride to her place now. She'll come. Ethan stared at her. This woman who 6 weeks ago had been kneeling in dirt, starving, with 40 cents to her name, was now reorganizing his entire operation with the calm precision of a battlefield general. Clara, when did you learn to drive cattle? Daniel taught me. Of course he did. Are we doing this or not? We're doing this. She rode to Abigail's. Abigail arrived within the hour, on her ancient mule, carrying a shotgun and a basket of biscuits. I assume there's trouble, Abigail said. Bellamy dammed the creek, Clara said. Abigail's face hardened. That's not business. That's war. Will you stay with the children? Child, I raised 6 of my own and buried 3 husbands. I can handle a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old for 2 days. She looked at Noah and May. We're going to have an adventure. What kind of adventure? May asked. The kind with biscuits and stories and absolutely no bedtimes. May's face lit up. Noah tried not to smile and failed. Ethan knelt in front of his son. Noah, Mrs. Turner is in charge. You help her with everything. And you remember what I said about the door. Bolt it. Don't open it. That's my boy. He hugged May. She squeezed his neck so hard he felt his throat tighten for reasons that had nothing to do with pressure. Come back soon, Papa. 2 days, sweetheart. Bring Clara back too. I will. They rode out with 20 head by mid-morning. Clara on one of Ethan's horses, working the right flank like she'd been born to it. She whistled the cattle forward, turned strays with a confidence that made Ethan realize Daniel Whitfield hadn't just taught her theory, he'd made her a rancher. They drove through the worst heat of the day, didn't stop except to water the cattle of a shallow creek that hadn't been dammed, because it was on territory too poor for Bellamy to bother with. That night, they camped beside the herd. You should sleep, Clara said. You've been riding for 2 days. So have you. I slept at the ranch. No, you didn't. You sat on that porch all night waiting for me. She poked the fire with a stick. Maybe. Clara. Fine, I didn't sleep. I was terrified. Are you satisfied? That you were worried about me? That I couldn't function because you were gone. That's not something I wanted to feel again. The last time I couldn't sleep because a man wasn't home, he never came home. The fire crackled between them. I'm here, Ethan said. You're here now. What about tomorrow? What about when Bellamy escalates again? What about when Hank Whitfield decides threats aren't enough? Then we deal with it. That's not a plan. It's a promise. Different thing. Better thing. Clara set down the stick, looked at him across the fire. I need to tell you something, she said. All right. In that church, when you stood up, when you said everything you said, I wasn't just grateful. I wasn't just relieved. What were you? She held his gaze. Terrified. Because I realized I cared about what happened to you more than what happened to me. And the last time I cared about someone that much, I lost him. And I don't think I can survive it twice. Ethan felt every word land in his chest like a stone dropping into deep water. Clara, I can't promise you I won't die. Nobody can promise that. But I can promise you something Daniel couldn't. What? I can promise you that if something happens to me, you won't be left alone. The claim is filed. Your name is on every document. And there are people in that town. Abigail, Tom Drucker, the Garretts, who stood up in a church and chose to see you. You're not invisible anymore. Whatever happens to me, you're not invisible." Clara's chin trembled. She pressed her lips together, hard. "That's not what I want, Ethan." "What do you want?" "I want you to stay alive." "I plan to." "Plan harder," he laughed. That quiet, private laugh she'd drawn from him once before. The one that felt like a door opening in a house that had been locked shut. "Come here," he said. She didn't move. "Clara, come here." She stood up, walked around the fire, sat down beside him, not touching. Close enough to touch. "I haven't sat next to a man like this since Daniel," she said. "I haven't asked anyone to, since Sarah. We're a pair of wrecks." "We are, but the house is still standing." She leaned against him, slowly, testing the weight, like she wasn't sure either of them could hold it. He put his arm around her shoulders. Not romantic, not yet. Protective. The way you hold something you've decided to keep. They sat like that until the fire burned low, and 20 head of cattle shifted and breathed in the dark. Each one worth the price of survival. Each one a small defiance against a man who thought he could own a town by owning its debts. They reached Medicine Bow by noon the next day. The cattle broker was fair. Market price, no haggling. Clara handled the negotiation because she knew the weight-to-price ratios better than Ethan did, and the broker respected competence, regardless of gender. They rode home with enough money to buy 6 months of feed, hire a well digger, and pay Mrs. Abigail Turner for her trouble, though Abigail refused payment with a look that could have curdled fresh milk. "You insult me again with money, Ethan Calloway, and I'll whip you with my late husband's belt." "Yes, ma'am." The children were perfect. May told me a story about a princess who fixes roofs. I can't imagine where she got that idea. She looked at Clara. Clara smiled. "Pure imagination." "Mm-hmm." Abigail left. The ranch settled. And for 3 days, nothing happened. That was worse. Because Ethan knew silence from a man like Bellamy wasn't peace. It was preparation. On the 4th day, the county sheriff rode in. He was a lean man named Garrett. No relation to Elsa Garrett from the church. He rode a bay horse and wore his badge like it weighed 40 pounds. "Calloway," he said from the saddle. "Sheriff, got a complaint filed against you. Horace Bellamy alleges you defamed his character publicly, incited economic disruption, and are harboring a woman with a disputed legal claim for the purpose of personal enrichment." That's a lot of words for a man who steals from his neighbors. "I don't need your editorial, Calloway. I need your statement. The territorial judge is coming through in 3 weeks. Bellamy wants a hearing." Clara came out on the porch. Sheriff Garrett tipped his hat. "Ma'am?" "Sheriff, is there a counterfiling?" "Excuse me?" "If Mr. Bellamy is filing complaints, I'd like to file a counter-complaint. Water diversion in a drought season is a territorial offense. So is debt coercion and credit manipulation to suppress free trade." The sheriff looked at her. Then at Ethan, then back at her. "You got documentation?" Clara reached inside the door, pulled out a folder, the feed ledger, the pricing comparisons, statements from Henderson, Buell, and Tom Dawson about the dam. All written out in Clara's precise hand, organized, dated, and witnessed. She'd been building this case for weeks, quietly. While Ethan fought the visible battles, she'd been constructing the legal one. "This is thorough," the sheriff said, flipping through it. "I was married to an engineer, Sheriff. He taught me to document everything." Garrett closed the folder, looked at both of them. "I'll present both filings to the judge, but I want you both to understand something. Bellamy has money, influence, and a preacher in his pocket. A hearing isn't justice, It's a contest. And contests go to whoever's better prepared. Then we'll be better prepared, Clara said. Garrett tipped his hat again, rode out. Ethan turned to Clara. How long have you been building that file? Since the day I found your feed ledger. You never said anything. You were busy standing up in churches and riding 30 miles and threatening Hank Whitfield. I figured somebody should do the quiet work. Ethan stared at her. This woman. This impossible woman. Clara Whitfield. Yes? When I propose to you again, and I will, it won't be about mineral rights. She held his gaze, didn't blink. Good, she said. She went back inside, and Ethan stood on his porch, watching the sky darken in the west, where clouds were building for the first time in months. And he thought about what his father had said about cowards, and what Sarah would have said about Clara, and what Daniel Whitfield must have known the day he married a woman who could outthink every man in the territory. The storm was coming. Not the one in the sky. The one in the courthouse. And for the first time since this started, Ethan Calloway felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not hope. Bigger than hope. Certainty. That whatever came next, he wasn't facing it alone. And neither was she. Noah appeared at the door. Papa, Clara says dinner's ready. Coming. She made pie, real pie, with the sugar Mrs. Turner brought. Is it any good? Noah almost smiled. Almost. It's better than Mama's. He said it without flinching this time, and Ethan felt the last nail in the wall around his heart pull free. Not with drama, not with ceremony. Just a boy choosing to let go of a comparison he no longer needed to make, and a father recognizing that healing doesn't arrive with trumpets. It arrives with pie. He walked inside, 4 plates on the table, 4 people in the chairs, and in the west, thunder rolled for the first time since spring, and the dry earth waited for rain it had almost forgotten how to receive. The rain came 3 days before the hearing. Not gentle rain, not the kind that eases into the ground and coaxes green from brown. This rain came like a fist, like God had been holding his breath for 3 months and finally let go all at once. Clara heard it first. She was at the kitchen table, organizing documents for the hearing, when the first crack of thunder shook the window glass. She looked up, looked at Ethan. That's not just rain, she said. No, that's a flood. Ethan was out the door before the second crack hit. The sky had gone from white heat to black fury in less than an hour. Wind ripped across the ranch flat and hard. The stock tanks that had been nearly dry were already overflowing, and the creek, the one Bellamy had dammed upstream, was surging. Somewhere above Sawyer's Bend, that dam was taking more pressure than 2 men with shovels had built it to hold. If that dam breaks, Clara said, coming up behind him, every low field between here and town floods. Including Bellamy's warehouse. They looked at each other. Including Bellamy's warehouse, Clara repeated. Every piece of inventory he owns. Every record. Every ledger. Couldn't happen to a nicer man. Ethan, there are families downstream. The Hendersons, the Buells. Their homes are in the floodplain. The satisfaction left his face. She was right. Bellamy's reckoning wasn't worth innocent families losing everything. I'll ride upstream. Break the dam controlled before it breaks wild. You can't do it alone. That dam's holding back 3 months of drought runoff. Then I'll find help. Who? Henderson won't come. Miller's too far. Noah appeared in the doorway. I'll go. No, Ethan and Clara said it at the same time. I can ride. I can carry tools. Papa, you need someone. You're 9 years old. I'm old enough. Ethan looked at his son, looked at Clara. He rides behind me, Ethan said. He carries the tools. He stays on the bank. That's the deal. Clara grabbed his arm, hard. If that water breaks while you're near it. I know. Ethan. I know, Clara. She released his arm, stepped back. Her face was a war between fear and trust won by the thinnest margin he'd ever seen. I'll ride to town, she said. Get whoever will come. Henderson, Drucker, anyone. You can't ride in this. Watch me. She was saddled and gone before he could argue. May stood on the porch in her nightgown, watching 3 people ride into a storm in 3 different directions. And she didn't cry. She just held her cloth doll tight and whispered, "Be brave. Be brave. Be brave." Ethan and Noah reached Sawyer's Bend in 20 minutes. The dam was crude, rocks, timber, packed mud, but it had held through the drought because there was nothing to hold back. Now, with 3 months of accumulated runoff channeling through the narrow bend, the water was chest high against the barrier and rising. It's going to go, Noah said. His voice was steady, but his hands were shaking. Not if we open it first. We cut a channel on the side. Let the water release slow instead of all at once. How? Shovels, picks, and you pray while I dig. Ethan waded to the dam's edge. The water was cold, shockingly cold after months of heat, and the current pulled at his legs like hands trying to drag him under. He drove the pick into the packed mud at the dam's right flank, where the bank was lowest, and started cutting. Noah passed tools from the bank. Rope, a second shovel. He worked with a focus that made Ethan's chest ache with pride and terror in equal measure. The water fought back. Every shovelful of mud Ethan removed, the current tried to expand too fast. He had to control the breach, widen it inch by inch, or the whole dam would collapse and send a wall of water straight through the valley. "Papa," Noah shouted, "someone's coming!" Ethan looked up, water to his waist, mud in his eyes. Tom Drucker came riding through the rain on a horse that looked as old and stubborn as he was. Behind him, young Will Dawson. Behind Will, 2 men Ethan didn't recognize. "Mrs. Whitfield came tearing into town like the devil was chasing her," Drucker shouted over the storm. "Said you were up here trying to be a hero." "I'm trying to not let half the valley flood." "Same thing." Drucker dismounted, grabbed a shovel. "Show me where to dig." They worked for 2 hours, 5 men in a flooding creek, cutting a controlled channel through an illegal dam, while a 9-year-old boy ran tools and a storm tried to wash them all downstream. The water released in stages, first a trickle, then a steady flow, then a wide, manageable stream that spread across the low fields without the destructive force of a full breach. By the time they finished, every man was soaked, exhausted, and shaking, but the valley was safe. Drucker sat on the bank, breathing hard. "Bellamy built this dam?" "Had it built," Ethan said. "Tom Dawson's boy confirmed it." Will Dawson nodded. "My father can testify. He will testify." Drucker spat into the mud. "I've lived in this town 40 years, watched Bellamy squeeze every man, woman, and child who owed him a nickel. Never said a word. That ends today." "Tom, don't Tom me, Calloway. I sat in that street and watched a woman kneel in the dirt, and I didn't lift a finger. I've been sick with it every night since. If standing up now costs me something, then it costs me something. Should have cost me something sooner." The men rode back together, through the storm, through the mud. Clara was waiting at the edge of town. She'd rallied 7 people. Henderson was there, white-faced and ashamed, but there. Elsa Garrett, James Buell, and 4 others who'd heard the commotion and come out despite the rain. When she saw Ethan ride in with Noah behind him, both of them mud-covered and whole, her face broke open. Not the controlled grief, not the careful dignity, just raw, unfiltered relief that hit her so hard she had to grab a fence post to stay upright. Ethan dismounted, walked to her. "You're alive," she said. "I promised." "You're covered in mud." "That too." She put her hands on his chest, felt his heartbeat. "Don't ever do that again." "Can't promise that one." "Try." Noah slid off the horse. May came running from Abigail Turner's side, where the old woman had brought her, wrapped in a blanket. May threw herself at Noah with enough force to knock a grown man sideways.
"You went in the water," May said. "Clara told me. You went in the water to save people."
Noah looked embarrassed and proud in the specific way only 9-year-old boys can manage. "I just carried tools."
"You're a hero."
"I'm not."
"You are."
Abigail Turner walked up, looked at the group, the mud-covered men, the rain-soaked woman, the children wrapped around each other. "Well," Abigail said, "I'd say this changes the hearing somewhat." She was right. Word spread through the territory like the floodwater itself. Ethan Calloway and a handful of men had broken Bellamy's illegal dam to save the valley, including Bellamy's own property. The rancher who'd been called a fool, the widow who'd been called a schemer, and a 9-year-old boy had done what Bellamy's money and Crow's sermons never could. They'd acted. While Bellamy had been sitting in his store counting inventory, the people he'd tried to crush had saved his livelihood. 3 days later, the territorial judge arrived. Judge Samuel Worth was 62 years old, had been on the territorial bench for 19 years, and had a reputation for 2 things: absolute fairness and absolute impatience with liars. The hearing was held in the town hall because the church was no longer considered neutral ground. Every seat was filled. People stood along the walls. Ranchers who hadn't come to town in months rode in. Bellamy arrived with a lawyer from Cheyenne. Expensive suit. Leather case. The kind of man who charged by the word and used plenty of them. Ethan arrived with Clara. No lawyer. Judge Worth looked at them over his spectacles. "Mr. Calloway, you don't have representation?" "I have the truth, Your Honor, and documentation." "The truth doesn't cross-examine witnesses, son." "No, sir, but it doesn't need to when the evidence speaks for itself." Clara laid the folder on the table. Every document, every ledger entry, every signed statement. The mineral survey in Daniel's handwriting. The filing receipts from the county seat. Tom Dawson's sworn testimony about the dam. Will Dawson's corroboration. Henderson's admission of credit coercion. Buell's account of foreclosure threats. The Cheyenne lawyer objected to everything. Foundation, hearsay, relevance. Judge Worth overruled him 11 times. "This is a territorial hearing, Counselor, not a courtroom drama. I'll decide what's relevant." Bellamy testified first. Controlled. Rehearsed. He painted himself as a community servant, unfairly attacked by a man under the influence of a manipulative woman. "I've served this town for 12 years, Your Honor. Extended credit when banks wouldn't. Kept families fed. And charged them 15% above market for the privilege," Clara said from her seat. The lawyer objected. Judge Worth looked at Clara. "Ma'am, you'll get your turn." "Yes, sir." Crow testified next. He was less polished than Bellamy. His hands fidgeted. His eyes darted to the door. "The letter I wrote regarding Mrs. Whitfield was a pastoral assessment," he said. "A spiritual concern about a young widow's fitness to manage property alone." "Reverend," Judge Worth said, "in 19 years on this bench, I have never seen a pastoral letter filed as supporting documentation for a land claim. Who asked you to write it? Crow's mouth opened and closed. Reverend? Mr. Bellamy suggested it might be helpful. Helpful to whom? Silence. To the Whitfield family's claim, Crow said finally, not to Mrs. Whitfield. No, sir. And was your assessment based on personal knowledge of Mrs. Whitfield's character? She attended services infrequently. Did you ever speak with her directly before writing that letter? A long pause. No, sir. You wrote a character assessment of a woman you'd never spoken to, at the request of a man who stood to profit from her losing her land. Crow's face was gray. When you put it that way, I put it the way it is, Reverend. The room was so quiet, Ethan could hear May breathing beside him. Then Clara stood. She didn't ask permission, didn't wait to be called. She stood up like she'd been standing up her whole life, and every time before had just been practice for this moment. Your Honor, my name is Clara Whitfield. My husband, Daniel Whitfield, died of fever 18 months ago. Before he died, he told me about mineral deposits on the North 40 of our property. He gave me his survey notes. He made me promise to protect the claim. She placed Daniel's notes on the judge's table. 3 days after his funeral, his brother Hank Whitfield and his father came to my home. They told me to leave. They said a woman couldn't hold title. I showed them the will. They took the will from my hands, tore it in half, and threw me out of my own house. A sound moved through the room, low, angry. I walked to town with nothing but the clothes I was wearing and Daniel's survey notes sewn into my dress. I asked Reverend Crow for help. He told me to go back east. I asked Mr. Bellamy for work. He said my kind brought talk. I asked 6 different families for assistance. Every one of them said they were sorry, but they couldn't get involved. She paused, steadied herself. I knelt in the dirt outside Bellamy's store, not because I was weak, because I had nowhere left to stand, and every person in this town walked past me. Every single one. She looked at Ethan. Except him. Except a man who had no reason to help me, and every reason not to. A man with 2 children and a dead wife, and a ranch he was barely holding together. He got off his horse. He gave me water. He gave me work. And for that, for basic human decency, this town tried to destroy him. Her voice cracked. She let it crack. Didn't fix it. Didn't apologize. I'm not here asking for sympathy, Your Honor. I'm here asking for what's mine. What my husband built. What his will promised me. What these men are trying to steal because they think a woman alone is a woman defeated. She straightened her shoulders. They were wrong. Judge Worth studied her for a long time. Then he looked at Bellamy. Mr. Bellamy, I've reviewed the land records in this territory. You have purchased 3 parcels surrounding the Whitfield claim in the past 5 months. All 3 are poor grazing land with no commercial value, unless there are mineral deposits on the adjacent property. Is that coincidence? The Cheyenne lawyer leaned in, whispered, I'm not asking your lawyer, Mr. Bellamy. I'm asking you. Bellamy's jaw worked. Those were investment purchases. Investments in what? Land. Worthless land. Land values change. They certainly do, especially when you're trying to control what's underneath the neighboring property. Worth picked up Daniel's survey notes, read them carefully. Mr. Calloway, you filed a mineral protection claim on behalf of Mrs. Whitfield at the county seat. You also filed a notice of intent to marry. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor. Is this marriage strategic or genuine? Ethan looked at Clara. She looked at him. Something passed between them that every person in that room could see, but neither of them could have named.
Both, Your Honor, Ethan said.
I intend to protect her claim legally, and I intend to stand beside her for the rest of my life. If she'll have me. Clara's breath caught. That's not a question for the court, Mr. Calloway, Worth said, but there was something at the corner of his mouth that might have been a smile. Here is my ruling. The room held its breath. The Whitfield counterclaim is dismissed. The will is clear, notarized, and legally binding. The pastoral letter submitted by Reverend Crowe has no legal standing and will be stricken from the record. Mrs. Clara Whitfield is the rightful owner of 80 acres, including all mineral rights. Clara's knees buckled. Ethan caught her arm. Furthermore, Worth continued, I am referring the matter of water diversion to the territorial marshal. Damming a public waterway during drought season is a territorial offense, carrying fines and potential imprisonment. Bellamy's face went white. And, Mr. Bellamy, I'm recommending a trade practices review of your general store. The evidence of systematic price manipulation and credit coercion is sufficient to warrant investigation. The Cheyenne lawyer started talking fast. Judge Worth held up his hand. Save your objections for the territorial court, counselor. This hearing is concluded. He banged his gavel. The room erupted. Not cheering, not applause. Something raw, something that sounded like pressure releasing from a vessel that had been sealed too long. People talking, people standing. Henderson crossing the room to shake Ethan's hand with tears in his eyes. Tom Drucker slapping his hat against his leg and saying, "About damn time," to nobody in particular. Bellamy walked out, straight-backed, rigid. The Cheyenne lawyer trailing behind him. Crowe slipped out through the side door, and nobody stopped him. Nobody cared enough to stop him. Clara stood in the middle of it all, with her hands still gripping Ethan's arm, and her face wet, and her body trembling. "It's over," she said. "The hearing's over. The rest is just starting." She looked up at him. "The rest?" "I believe I asked you a question in front of a territorial judge and 40 witnesses. You haven't answered." "You didn't actually ask. You said, 'if she'll have me.' That's a conditional statement, not a question." "Clara, ask me properly. No barn, no mineral rights, no legal strategy." Ethan took both her hands. In front of the whole town. In front of Judge Worth, who was pretending to organize papers, but watching over his spectacles. In front of Abigail Turner, who was already crying. In front of his children, who were standing together by the door. Noah's hand on May's shoulder, both of them still as stone. "Clara Whitfield, will you marry me? Not for protection, not for property. Because my house was empty and you filled it. Because my son trusts you and my daughter loves you and I—" He stopped, swallowed. A man who'd faced down Bellamy and Crowe, and a flooding creek, and a blocked road, and every kind of threat a small territory could throw at him. And this was the thing that made his voice break. "Because I love you," he said. "And I should have said it weeks ago, but I was too busy being noble to be honest." Clara laughed. A real laugh. Broken and beautiful, and full of everything she'd been holding back since the day she knelt in the dirt and a man got off his horse. "Yes," she said, "you impossible, stubborn, righteous fool. Yes." May screamed. The kind of scream only 6-year-old girls can produce. Pure, piercing joy that rattled the windows of the town hall. She launched herself between them, wrapping her arms around Clara's waist. "I knew it!" May shouted. "I knew it! Noah, I told you!" Noah walked over slowly, deliberately. He stopped in front of Clara. "You're going to be my mother?" he said. "If you'll let me," Clara said.
I'm not trying to replace...
I know, Noah said. Mama's mama. Nobody replaces her. That's right. But the table's got 4 chairs, and you sit in one of them. So I reckon that makes you family already. He extended his hand. Clara took it. Then he pulled her into a hug so fierce and sudden that she gasped, and Ethan felt his eyes burn because his boy, his guarded, watchful, fierce little boy, had just chosen to love someone again. And that was the bravest thing anyone had done all day. Abigail Turner appeared beside them. She was openly sobbing and making no apologies for it.
If you don't invite me to this wedding, Ethan Calloway, I will haunt you.
Front row, Mrs. Turner.
It better be a short ceremony. I'm old and my knees hurt.
Yes, ma'am. She hugged Clara, whispered something in her ear that made Clara close her eyes and nod. They walked out of the town hall together, all 4 of them. The rain had stopped. Not gently, abruptly, like the storm had said its piece and moved on. Puddles stood in the street, mud caked everything, and the air smelled clean for the first time in months. Washed. New. Henderson stepped forward, hat in his hands. Calloway, I owe you an apology. You owe me hay, Jim. The apology can wait. Henderson almost smiled. You'll have your hay. And fair price on it. Fair price, I swear. James Buell, Tom Dawson, Elsa Garrett. One by one, people came. Not all of them, not even most, but enough. Enough to build something that looked like the beginning of a community that didn't run on one man's ledger. They drove home in the afternoon light. Clara sat beside Ethan. May sat on Clara's lap, something she'd started doing without asking, and Clara had started allowing without comment. Noah sat in the back, whittling a stick with his pocket knife, looking like a boy who'd aged 3 years and 6 weeks and come out the other side of it more himself than he'd ever been. When? Clara asked. When what? The wedding. Whenever you want. Not in that church. No, not in that church. At the ranch, on the porch, where you gave me water the first day. I gave you water in the street. You gave me water in the street. You gave me a home on the porch. That's where I want to stand when I marry you. Then that's where we'll stand. May tugged Clara's sleeve. Can I carry flowers? You can carry all the flowers. Can Noah carry flowers too? I'm not carrying flowers, Noah said from the back. He'll carry the rings, Ethan said. Noah stopped whittling. Really? If you're up for it. Yes, sir, I'm up for it. The wedding happened 2 weeks later. Abigail Turner organized it with the efficiency of a military campaign. She recruited Elsa Garrett for food, Tom Drucker for chairs, and young Will Dawson to haul a piano from the schoolhouse because a wedding without music is just paperwork. The piano was out of tune. Nobody cared. 23 people came. Not the whole town, not even close. But 23 people who chose to be there. Who drove or rode through mud-still roads to stand on a rancher's porch and witness something good. Clara wore a dress Abigail had altered from her own wedding trunk. White cotton. Simple. A blue ribbon at the collar that matched the one she'd sewn on May's dress weeks earlier. Ethan wore the white shirt. Sarah's shirt. The one she'd ironed the week before she died. He'd thought about that. Thought about whether it was wrong, whether it was disrespectful. Then he decided that wearing it was the most respectful thing he could do. Because Sarah had pressed that shirt for a man she loved, and that man was about to make a promise to keep living, to keep building, to keep showing up. And Sarah would have wanted that shirt there when he did. Judge Worth performed the ceremony. He'd stayed an extra week, officially for the Bellamy investigation. Unofficially because, as he told Abigail, "I haven't been to a wedding in 11 years, and this one seems like it's earned." The ceremony was short. Abigail had insisted.
Do you, Ethan Calloway, take Clara Whitfield?
"I do."
I haven't finished the question.
"Doesn't matter. I do." Clara laughed. Judge Worth sighed. Abigail blew her nose.
Do you, Clara Whitfield?
"I do." "You two deserve each other." Noah held the rings. His hands didn't shake. He placed them on Worth's Bible with the precision of someone performing surgery. And when Clara slid the ring onto Ethan's finger, the boy exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for the entire 6 weeks since a stranger arrived at his home. May threw flowers, not along the aisle, at people, with force and enthusiasm, and absolutely no aim. Tom Drucker caught a daisy in his coffee. He drank it anyway. Ethan kissed Clara on the porch of his ranch house, in front of 23 witnesses and 2 children and 1 ancient mule that Abigail had tied to the fence and which chose that exact moment to bray at full volume. "Romantic," Clara said. "I aim to please." That evening, after the guests had gone and the chairs had been stacked, and the out-of-tune piano had been hauled back to the schoolhouse, the 4 of them sat at the kitchen table. Ethan had set the plates. 4, like always. Clara reached into the cupboard and took out a 5th plate. Set it at the end of the table. Empty. Ethan looked at it. Looked at her. "Something you want to tell me?" he said. Clara sat down, put her hands flat on the table. The same gesture she'd made dozens of times, calculating, organizing, preparing. But this time, her eyes were soft. "I wasn't sure until this morning," she said. "But yes, there's going to be a 5th plate at this table." May looked at the plate. "Who's it for?" "For someone who hasn't arrived yet, sweetheart." May tilted her head. Then her eyes went enormous. "A baby?" "In the spring, if everything goes well." Noah's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. He looked at Clara, looked at his father, set the fork down. "A brother or a sister?" he asked. "We won't know until they get here." Noah considered this with the gravity of a boy who'd learned that family was not something you were simply born into, but something you chose, day after day, through every hard thing and every good thing and every biscuit eaten at a table that kept adding plates. "I hope it's a brother," he said. "May's enough sisters for anyone." "Hey!" May threw a biscuit at him. He caught it, ate it. Ethan reached across the table and took Clara's hand. He didn't say anything, didn't need to. His hand was rough from fences and rains and creek mud. Hers was rough from work and survival and the long, hard road from kneeling in dirt to sitting in a home that bore her name. They held on. Outside, the Wyoming territory stretched wide and wild, and full of the kind of silence that comes after storms. The creek ran clean. The stock tanks were full. And somewhere in town, Horace Bellamy was sitting in a store that no longer held the power it once did, reading a summons from the territorial marshal, realizing that empires built on fear collapse the moment someone refuses to be afraid. The plates stayed on the table, 4 filled, 1 waiting. Not charity, not scandal, not pity. Family. Built in dust and drought and danger. Built by a man who got off his horse. Built by a woman who refused to break. Built by a boy who learned to trust. Built by a girl who saw what no one else would look at. Built under fire. And it held.